Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Hoberman. I manage Technics Publications, and we've actually have published over 150 books about data, and probably about 80 authors, experts in their fields. And of all our authors, I always find it the most difficult to introduce Chris Date because if I start off with words like legendary, amazing, they're not very concrete terms. So I'm looking for a word that summarizes when someone has been there since the beginning and helped shape our entire data profession. I don't know what that word is. If you know that word, please let me know. I'm very happy to introduce Chris Date. He, he has written a number of books. We actually published 6 books of his, including the 2 that we're going to talk about today, database streaming. And actually, my first book on data that I ever read was his Introduction to Database Systems, which has sold over 900,000 copies. So very happy to have Chris with us today. Thank you, Chris. Welcome. And I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you, Steve. And gee, I really hate these introductions, but I know you have to go through that stuff. But anyway, thank you for asking me to talk about my two new books, or to do a little puff piece about the 2 new books, I should say. The books are called Database Dreaming, Volumes 1 and 2. Having difficulty with the technology again. There we go. Sorry, I couldn't get the slides to advance. There's a picture of the covers to the 2 new books, Database Dreaming, Volumes 1 and 2. And basically, well, let me tell you the background to these books. I did an online seminar for Steve a few months ago. And in the discussion that followed that seminar, one of the people attending said, he said, look, I know you've written a lot of books, and a lot of your books have really interesting technical papers and so on in them collected together, but those books are very, very hard to find. Why don't you do something about making them available again? So I thought, well, yeah, that's a great idea. So I went back to the books in question, a bunch of them, and I went through the papers. Maybe there were, I don't know, a couple of hundred, maybe 150, 200. A lot of them are not very good, I have to tell you, and I got rid of those. But I winnowed them out, and there were about 20 that I thought were pretty good and deserved to be revived. So what I did was I took those 20 papers and I basically rewrote them all, brought them up to date. And when I'd done that, I found it was too much for one book. So it became 2 books. So the subtitle for both these 2 books is Relational Writings, Revised and Revived. The old books were called Relational Writings. So why did I do the books? Well, as I've just said, they were based on a bunch of earlier books for the generic title Relational Database Writings. Why the title? The title is Database Dreaming. Well, there were 2 answers to that question. The first is, it's a kind of respectful nod on my part to those wonderful so-called circle and dot paintings that the Aboriginals of Australia do. Let me tell you a little bit of background here. I've been to Australia many times, but the first time I think was probably about 1979, and it was just about the time that these so-called circle and dot paintings were becoming to be known. I went to an exhibition of them in Sydney. I think it was the first exhibition outside the northern part of the country where the work started. And I was completely blown away, bowled over by these fantastic paintings. And damn it, I could have bought paintings. I could have bought a painting by Clifford Possum. It was about $500, I think. Well, that was a lot of money for me at the time, but those paintings are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars now. Mind you, they're pretty big. There's nowhere I could put it in the house, but I just love the stuff. So I took the idea of dreaming about database and remembered the dreaming paintings that the Aboriginals do. To them, everything is part of what they call the dream time. And so there is even, they have a dream time for kangaroos, they have a dream time for people, they have a dream time for Ford cars, they have a dream time for IBM computers, everything has a dream time. And so databases could have a dream time too. And I thought database dreaming was therefore a pretty nice title. And then, of course, oh, yes, I should show you. That's an example of one of these circle and dot paintings. It's not a very good photograph, I'm afraid. It's at an angle. But this is a Milky Way dreaming. It's a picture of the Milky Way. I remember when I saw this painting in a gallery in Melbourne, I was completely blown away by this one. And what happened here was I was teaching a class, and on the lunchtime I went out for a walk around the town, and I saw this gallery and went in, and there was a whole bunch of paintings there, including this one. And my wife was with me on that trip, but she'd gone out for the day. I think she'd gone to the local museum or something. So when we met up again in the evening, I said, I went to this gallery at lunchtime today, and I saw a painting I really think we should buy. So let's go back down there this evening, because they're open till 8 o'clock. And I'll let you look through the paintings yourself and see if you pick out the same one. I did not tell her which one it was. And thank goodness she did pick out the exact same picture. The Milky Way dreaming. Here it is. We bought it. We got it home. We put it on our wall in the living room. And I had visions of sort of sitting at a living room table just gazing at this painting. And indeed, that's what I often did. There's a sad postscript to this story, though, which is that, as some of you will know, we lost our home in one of the California wildfires a couple of years ago. And of course, one of the things we lost was this very painting. I'm really sad about that, but there it is. Anyway, onward. Why the title? First of all, because of the Aboriginal painting. Secondly, because I wanted to talk about my own dream. So what is my database dream? My database dream is very simple. I want to get a relational DBMS built. I mean, Ted Codd invented the relational model back in 1969, 1970. He wrote these incredible papers about the relational model in the early 70s. Everyone said, yeah, this is great stuff. But no one has actually built a relational DBMS yet. They've built DBMSs they call relational, but they depart in so many ways from the original dream that I don't think we have any genuine relational systems even today. So that's my dream. And this is what the books are about. I've made a couple of pages here showing the titles of the papers in the books. So the first one is about me, I'm afraid, my life as a writer, kind of a personal thing. But the rest of the papers in that book, and indeed the papers in the second book, are all about various aspects of doing relational right. You can think of them as part of a blueprint for building a proper relational DBMS. Let me say a word or two about one or two of the papers in this collection. Well, look at number 12 in volume 1, a normalization problem. This is about a specific problem of normalization that looks very, very simple on the surface and turns out to be immensely complicated when you really poke into it. It turns out, too, that the paper is based on another paper by somebody else in this field who wrote all about this problem and got it monumentally wrong, thereby demonstrating that people don't know as much about normalization as they really ought to. So I wrote that paper to kind of set the record straight. Number 8 there, you see, a critique of SQL. Really, when I say that these so-called relational DBMSs are not relational, really what they are is they're SQL DBMSs, and it is SQL that really departs from the principles of the relational model in oh so many ways. I could get very eloquent about that and could talk about it for a day or two at least, but now is not the time. The second volume, Much Ado About Nothing. Yes, that was basically the result of a debate between Ted Codd and myself. Ted and I were partners and we were friends, and I was full of admiration of what he did, but there was one aspect of what he did that we did not agree about, and that was the whole business of nulls. Ted thought nulls were a good thing. I think nulls are a very bad thing. So I wrote a short paper years ago complaining about nulls. Ted got very upset about it, and the upshot was that we had a debate in print, which the author saw fit to call Much Ado About Nothing. And that debate, regardless of where you stand on the issue, that debate at least presents a lot of information about both sides, those who think nulls are good and those who think nulls are bad. By the way, I have to tell you one thing about that debate. During the course of it, Ted Card made a remark that is absolutely priceless. Ted said, database management would be easier if missing information didn't exist. Which I don't think he quite meant what he said there, but it's a terrific remark. But anyway, moving on. Oh, table dumb and table D, and that's something that not many people know about at all, but they ought to. Without getting into a lot of detail, I'll just tell you that table dumb and table D are our pet names for two very special relations. They're relations with zero columns, zero attributes, if you like. You see, a relation has a set of attributes, and sets can have any number of members, including no members at all. The set containing nothing is a perfectly respectable set, the empty set. So if a relation has a set of attributes, a relation with an empty set of attributes is a perfectly respectable relation. Not only is it respectable, it's very important. Without getting into a lot of detail, I'll just tell you that these two special relations, table dumb and table D, the ones with no attributes, these play a role with respect to relational databases that is precisely analogous to the role played by zero in ordinary arithmetic. Now, can you imagine an arithmetic without zero? Well, of course not. At least I hope you can't. So can you imagine a relational database without table dumb and table D? You ought not to be able to. I say it again. Zero in arithmetic, table dumb, table D in the relational world, they're comparable things and they're just as important. So a bunch of other things, multiple assignment, another very, very important operation that we really need. So bottom line is putting all the things, all the recommendations in these papers together, what you have is a large part of a blueprint for doing relational DBMSs right. So that's what the books are about in a nutshell. Just very quickly, Steve did mention that I've done some other books for him for techniques, and here's the list of them. But they're all, with one exception, basically collections of essays and papers on various aspects of relational technology. The one that's the exception is the one shown in green here, E.F. Codd and Relational Theory, Revised Edition, a detailed review and analysis of Codd's major database writings. That was, well, it was a kind of a labor of love on my part. As I said a few minutes ago, Ted wrote these wonderful papers back in the late 60s, early 70s, which laid the foundation for the entire relational field. And, you know, it all came from nowhere. Ted invented this whole thing by himself. That said, when anyone comes out with a huge major invention like Ted did, you may get a lot of things right, but you will get a few things wrong as well. It will be impossible to get every detail right away. So what I've done in this book is gone back and reviewed the original papers that Ted wrote, explaining them, calling out in detail what Ted got right and explaining the implications, but also here and there explaining what he got wrong as well, because I think it's important to know that as well as knowing what he got right. So you can tell, I guess, that book is a particular favorite of mine, but I do think it's a good book. Anyway, that's pretty much all I want to say. Thank you very much for listening. And having said that, let me finish by wishing you the best of luck and the best of success with everything you do in the database world. Thank you.